Hey guys, today I wanted to give you my long-term review of the Lian Li Dynamic XL. The mini version's coming up soon, so I thought it'd be a good time to just refresh what I really like and maybe don't like about this case. So let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. So when the first Lian Li Dynamic came out, me, along with basically everybody else that likes PC, did a build in it. But I was never able to really warm up to the original version too much. It just seemed like it was missing a little something here, a little something there. It was almost like I couldn't fit all of the hardware that I wanted to fit in it. The build quality was a little bit finicky, and while I did like the design, I never really did a build that I fell in love with. But then came the Lian Li Dynamic, the XL, the extra large version. So immediately when this version came out, I really thought it was going to fill in all of the gaps that the original one had. The original one is still a great case. A lot of people use it. In fact, I really do like the size. The small size is great. It's not, of course, a mini ITX system, but for a system that you can fit so much in, it certainly is pretty impressive. So I did the build in the Lian Li Dynamic XL. It stayed more or less the same. Basically, you'll see what type of old school build this is because I have here, let's talk about some of the components that I was able to fit in here first. It's going to be X299, the ROG Rampage Extreme. Now it has a 10980XC 18-core processor. Now, this build has this because I did it back before Ryzen was really as popular as it is now, and of course in my main system I do have a 5950X, which more or less in most cases is fairly superior to the 10980XC, but that still doesn't mean that the 10980XC isn't a very capable processor. 18 cores, you can overclock it really well so it can work for gaming, and of course for content creation it is a really great processor. And the motherboard, the X299 Rampage VI Extreme, by far certainly is the best motherboard that I've ever owned, not only because of the features, but the design is something that I just haven't seen in many more modern motherboards. The RGB implementation on it is awesome. It just looks like a really nice high-end motherboard, and that's why I've kept it for so long in this build, and I really think that it filled out. And remember, this is going to be an eATX motherboard, meaning that it's going to be a little bit bigger than a standard ATX one. So this case definitely was able to do it without any problem. I had tried the X570 Godlike in the original Lian Li Dynamic, and while it did fit, I thought it was very, very tight. You couldn't use the cable grommets that well. But in this case, even a large motherboard like this fit without any issues at all. And this build still has the 2080 Ti, regardless of how good the 3080 and 3090 are. 2080 Ti, especially a water-cooled one, are certainly very, very exceptional still. I think you can, I was even playing Cyberpunk 2077 the other day, and we'll talk about some of the performance a little later, but it still performs admirably well. Now, one note that I will make about the vertical GPU mount, of course it's water-cooled, so you don't have to worry about airflow on the GPU. The bottom and top radiator will take care of that. But doing the vertical GPU mount, it kind of really restricts my view of the motherboard. So next time when I do a rebuild of this case, I may not do the vertical GPU mount, because while I think it looks really cool, it just really restricts the access to the motherboard. Like if you have to switch out an M.2 or plug something in, even while being water cooled, sometimes you can do that if it's just a regular horizontal GPU. So while I really like the look, that's certainly something that I think I would change in the future just because of the accessibility. But otherwise, I was able to fit the GPU in there with that Cablemods bracket fairly easily. I have a very thick 54mm radiator on the bottom, and on the top it's an EK Performance Edition radiator, about 40mm. And you'll notice really thick fans. Those are the Meltemi fans. They're a lot thicker than normal. And then of course we also have the water distribution block and pump in the back. That I actually really like because it's very easy to fill. It's easy to drain. I have the little drain valve right on the bottom. So it's actually a fairly easy loop to work in. In fact, I've even switched my CPU out without actually draining the loop. I did a video on this a while back. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but these EK fittings really held up very well, very, very secure, which certainly is, very great to see. Recently, I've been using this build more, and I must say I'm very impressed with the performance. I was actually playing Cyberpunk 2077, and I couldn't notice a huge difference between this and my RTX 3090 system. Of course, that one is definitely getting more frames per second, but in general, with like DLSS on auto, even with ray tracing on, the 2080 Ti definitely was still doing a pretty nice job. And with this much cooling performance, it was staying in the 40s in terms of Celsius, the temperature. Very impressive. My EVGA for the Win 3 3090 gets up near 80 Celsius, so we're talking about almost twice the temperature. Of course, one is liquid cooled with two big radiators, and for now, the other one is still air cooled. And even the 10980 XC, which is an 18-core processor, temperatures stay pretty good, and it seems to at least hold up well against the 5950X. Of course, in most cases, the 5950X is my preferred choice, and it is going to beat this, but 10980 XC, still pretty impressive, especially after they lower the price. But as we all know, X299, it's sort of a little bit of a dead end right now, not anybody else really getting into it. And of course, nowadays, the way to go is definitely with AMD. So overall, I think this case really held up very, very well. Build quality is great. Performance has been fantastic. It pretty much fixed all of the issues that I had with the initial, the original Lian Li. And I'm actually looking forward to building in the mini version. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to fit anywhere near as much hardware as you can in the XL, but you can still fit a pretty decent amount. It has a lot of the same layout. You just have to minimize everything, which nowadays with very powerful and smaller components, I actually think is a fairly good idea. So I'm definitely looking forward to building in that case. But to summarize, I'm actually long-term very, very happy with the Lian Li Dynamic XL. I can recommend this case really to anybody. It's probably one of the best cases on the market. I know it gets used a lot, especially the original version, but I think it's there for a reason. It's one of the best built, best performing, and best looking cases on the market, regardless if you're doing water cooling, which it's perfect for. You can do air cooling in here. Airflow's pretty good from the bottom and the top. So you can really do a lot of builds in this case, and I would certainly recommend it to anybody. Over time, a few things that I really learned to like about this case. Of course, it makes an amazing gaming PC. I mean, the visual eye candy is incredible. You can see it from the two angles, the front and the side. The tempered glass looks absolutely amazing. Something else that I really liked about it was that if you're doing it as a workstation, the amount of hard drives you can actually fit in this, it's like pretty ridiculous in terms of like a regular workflow. And by hard drives, more specifically, I mean not only the regular 3.5 inch, but also 2.5 inch SSDs. But even more impressively is the ease of use that you actually get with this case when you're doing like a workstation build in hard drives. In the back, you can unscrew the little panel and basically hot swap your hard drives. There are spaces for 4 different hard drives that you can put either a regular hard drive or an SSD hard drive, making it for something who's like a content creator, or if you just want to have all your backups on the system, making it incredibly convenient because it already has the built-in connections to facilitate your SATA and your power. So you basically just slide in your hard drive with the little bracket that they give you. I thought that was actually like a really smart integration. Not only that, where the power supply is in the back, it's very easy to manage your cables. The back panel is laid out very well. Even the front, you have a nice selection of I/O. You have, your USB, even USB-C. So overall, not only aesthetically, performance-wise, but also in all of the features and the build quality, I really do think this is probably, aside from going to like a Case Labs or a really expensive custom case, it has to be basically one of the best cases you can get on the market. It's extremely flexible, and the good thing, even though it's not like a cheap case, it's not like that expensive. The XL, let's say $199, it's certainly not a cheap case by any means, but there are cases out there that are $300, $400, $500 that are nowhere near as good as this. So certainly this is a very well priced case for what you get, and I've had it long term with this beefy system in it. It looks pretty much like new. Everything's in great condition. It's held up really well. It's certainly something you can redo builds. I plan to take this apart, maybe put in a couple different components, make that GPU horizontal so I get better use out of it, maybe even change some of the water cooling around. So certainly something that not only looks great but works great as well. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions on this case or if you're thinking of building in something similar. In terms of some things I didn't like about the case, and if it has competition, it's actually really hard to find faults with it. I mean, you do have to take the top panel off to be able to slide the glass panels off, but that's a very minor inconvenience. You can put a 100mm fan in the back now. With the regular version, you couldn't. I would say most of my complaints would be directed at the original Lian Li. The XL, I really think, did solve many of these issues. The size is perfect. I definitely wouldn't want it any larger. Which cases may compete with this? Well, aesthetically, it's a very unique look with the front, tempered glass panel, the side panel. So not too much is actually going to compete with it in terms of that aesthetic, if that's what you like. But around that same price or a little cheaper, I would say probably the Be Quiet cases and the fractal design cases. If you want high build quality and cases that actually have really cool things, like well thought of things that when you're building the computer you actually really appreciate, those are the two brands that I've certainly used the most, aside from my Case Labs case and the Lian Li case. Those are all great cases that you can not only do water cooling in, but you could also do really nice air cooled systems. But in general, this case definitely stands on its own. It's very unique and there's very little out there like it. That's why it's so popular. And remember to subscribe if you want to see my mini version of this, the case that's coming out now. It's going to be a very awesome build as well. Hit that thumbs up and I'll see you guys on the next video.